Well, old school movie reviews. Okay, this one's going to be a little bit different. This is going to be Valley of the Dolls from 1970, directed by Russ Meyer. I had heard about this movie for a long time, but I really didn't know all that much about it. I knew it was directed by Russ Meyer. I knew it came out in like the late 70s, or sorry, late 60s, early 70s, and I knew it was written by Roger Ebert. And that's right, the Roger Ebert, world famous movie critic, Pulitzer Prize winning Roger Ebert wrote this crazy movie. But beyond that, I really didn't know a whole lot. The way this movie came about is in the late 60s, around 1967 or so, there was a movie called Valley of the Dolls, which was basically this kind of corny soap opera movie about these three young women who are in the big city and they're involved in the entertainment business, and they all become successful and they become rich and they're famous, and it's all about their loves and their lives, and people are addicted to booze and pills, and they go through their ups and their downs and their rags and their riches, and so on and so forth. And the movie is really successful, and I guess the studio wanted to do a sequel. And the sequel was originally going to be written by Jacqueline Susan, who wrote the original novel that the original movie was based on. But I guess she and the studio had some sort of conflict or some sort of falling out, and there was a big lawsuit, and they couldn't use her story anymore. So they decided they were going to take the title and just make an all new movie with all new characters. And they bring in Russ Meyer. And Russ Meyer was known as this guy who did like drive-in movies and B movies and kind of like raunchy sex comedies and things like that. And the way that Roger Ebert got involved is Roger Ebert had, I believe, a year or two prior to this, or a couple of years before this, before any of this stuff was going on anyway, had written some letter or essay to the papers, um, defending slash champion of the works of Ross Meyer, basically saying that he's as much of an auteur as any mainstream person or French art film art director or whatever. And Ross Meyer saw that, and he started communicating with Roger, and they became big friends. They became buddies, they became friends. And I guess Russ contacted Ebert and saying something to the effect of like, yeah, you know what, I got a chance to direct this big Hollywood movie, but you know what, I'm not sure I can work with these Hollywood guys. Hey, why don't you come out here and help me write this film? So that's how Roger got involved. He basically just said, hey, you're my buddy, come hang out with me and work on this movie. So and so that's it. Roger Ebert had never written a script before or anything like that, and Roger, to his credit, is not very, he's not very precious about his side of writing this movie. He says all kinds of great things about Russ, but he pretty much knows some of the like flaws and things that go on or that occur in this story, which we'll get to in a moment. Basically, a plot is basically there's this all-girl rock band called the Carrie Nations. The band is Kelly, Casey, and Pet. Kelly's the singer. Casey plays, I think, bass guitar, and Pet's the drummer. And their manager is Kelly's boyfriend, a guy named Harris, who throughout the movie is kind of almost this kind of mopey type guy. What happens is, they all decide they're going to go to Hollywood and seek, fame and fortune and everything. And they end up staying with Kelly's rich Aunt Susan. Through rich Aunt Susan, they end up getting invited to these big deal Hollywood parties. And at one of these parties, they meet Z-Man. And Z-Man is this guy who's this famous, eccentric record producer. Z-Man takes a liking to their band and starts managing them and producing them and whatnot. And then he starts becoming rich and famous. And as this starts happening, Harris kind of sees himself getting pushed to the side in a couple ways. On one hand, Z-Man has taken over the band, and their career. And the other hand, Kelly starts spending time with this kind of Hollywood pretty boy guy. Unbeknownst to her, the Hollywood pretty boy guy, he's trying to take advantage of her fame and money. There's a sleazy lawyer guy in the story who is Aunt Susan's lawyer, and he's trying to control her money at the same time working his angle. Um, let's see here, the other girls, they've got their things going on. Pet is like dating this waiter dude who's supposed to be working his way through law school, but then the heavyweight champ gets involved in their relationship somehow. And then there's a woman who works in the fashion industry, and she's making Google eyes at Casey. And while Harris is feeling down and out, there's this other woman who I think is supposed to be like an X-rated or pornographic actress or performer or something like that. I'm not 100% certain. So she's got eyes on, she's got designs on him, and that's kind of basically the premise and the setup. There's a lot more stuff going on with the plot. I don't want to give too much of it away. I will say this: at the last, I say the last third of this movie, things just go spinning out of friggin' control. You watch scene after scene, you're like, what the hell was that? Like I was saying before, Roger Ebert, he doesn't, think that he's written Citizen Kane or anything like that. He pretty much will come out and say, oh yeah, that scene was real ham-fisted, or man, I had this person do this. I have no idea why they did that, even though I probably should know since I was a writer. And it's like, oh look, here's the scene where we have Casey be a booze hound and a pill popper, even though she's had no substance abuse problems before the movie, and then we don't address it again after the scene. But in this scene, she's a big, drunk or whatever. And there's, and he pretty much admits, they really didn't have any idea of like, what the overall story was going to be before they started. They didn't know what they were gonna do. They just sort of made stuff up as it went along. Stuff would happen in the news, and they would like put references to that in the movie and just make stuff up. There is a giant plot twist at the very end of this film, that wasn't even written in the script. They just decided at that day when they were shooting the scene to put this major plot twist in there. And the movie kind of feels like that in a way, like stuff just happens just to have stuff happening. But you know what? It's not a boring movie. You know what I mean? Whatever you think about it, it's not boring. I think what was going on, maybe, and this is just my interpretation, and if anybody else out there has seen this film, please tell me what you think. But I think what they were probably trying to do is, I think they were probably trying to like make a movie. I think they were trying to like walk a fine line between, on one hand, being a melodrama with humor in it versus being a just complete outrageous send-up of those type of movies. I'm not sure. I don't think they necessarily succeed 100% of the time. But like I said, you won't get bored watching this movie. It is something to see. One thing I would point out as far as, one thing that's really, a quality aspect of this movie is an actor named John Lazare. John Lazare plays the record producer Z-Man, and he does an excellent, excellent, excellent performance. This is like the best performance in this movie. I mean, he makes it work. Z-Man is this kind of flamboyant guy, and he talks crazy hipster jive at one point, and then he speaks over the top theatrical poetic nonsense at another point. But John Lazare makes it work. You believe his Z-Man. You believe that this guy and this milieu or scenario or whatever you want to say, would act like that, and you believe it all. It works. It works. You know what I mean? So it's almost worth seeing. It's almost worth seeing this film just to see his performance, because I think he's really, really good. He pretty much owns. He owns this film as far as the acting is concerned. Let's see here. Another interesting thing is this movie was originally rated X. Um, but I think it's interesting. A couple of things where it was rated X, right, in the early days of the Motion Picture Academy, rating systems. So X didn't quite mean then what it came to mean a few years later, which is, oh, this is some hardcore pornography, which, of course, that's not what this movie is. Just to lend a little perspective, back in the same days, Midnight Cowboy, John Voight, Dustin Hoffman was originally rated X, and I can remember seeing that movie on broadcast television, when I was a teenager. And why was it rated X? Well, just because of the subject matter, I guess. John Voight is like this, guy trying to be a gigolo, and he's going to one of these swinging psychedelic parties and stuff like that. Even though I do believe a couple of years later or a year later they appealed the rating or whatever and got it rated R. But the point being, it was pretty much the equivalent of what we have today, which is the NC-17 rating. Having said that, the physical copy that I own and have in my hands right now is rated NC-17, and I'm not sure, I'm not sure if it really should be rated NC-17, I wonder if it came out like right now today, it would get that rating, by unknown people or whatever. Because I will say, there's some violence in this movie at the very end, but I've seen action movies and horror movies that were way more, intense or, explicit than that. And I've definitely seen there's like a smidge of nudity in this movie, of actual, and what I mean is actual nudity. But I've seen, other films that had way more nudity in it than this film did, and those movies were rated R. But I will say this, talking about, the sex aspect of the movie, there is a lot of, a lot of TNA in the movie, a lot of kind of teasing in it, in the sense that, you get scenes of people wearing, sheer clothing or negligee. You do see some silhouettes of people. There is a lot of, like the kids say, side boobage going on, There's a lot of things where people are topless and they're holding their chest against somebody else's chest, You don't see anything, but, you know what I mean? And then, too, the whole thing is, it is very much depicting the whole sort of, free love, casual sex, generation and all that sort of thing. So I'm sure that kind of worked its way into it. I'm sure the fact that it's directed by Russ Meyer, who was a guy who was, always been known for doing kind of semi-raunchy movies, whether explicit or not explicit, It's directed by Russ Meyer, And at one point, somebody, I'm not sure if I even mentioned this before, but I know at one point he was nicknamed King of the Nudies, So I'm sure, that had something to do with the fact that it's still rated NC-17. I guess we're at the point where it's like, would I recommend this movie or not? I kind of sort of would, but I would do it with this, caveat or whatever. If you're the type of person that, you want your movies to be serious and you want them to make sense and, you want your quality acting and all that sort of thing, you might not like this movie, you might be disappointed or whatever, But if you're open-minded and you're willing to sit down for just a crazy film watching experience, I would say definitely pick it up. Let's see here. What I was going to say. I was going to say, I have seen Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. I'm kind of interested in another movie that Russ Meyer directed called Mudhoney. If anybody's seen these films, let me know. If you got any other Russ Meyer movies, let me know. And let me know what you think of my assessment of this film. And that's it. Thanks a lot, and you guys have a good one.